Best practices in the field of cybersecurity includes monitoring of the systems and detect anomalies and misuse of access privileges. That basically says that we are monitoring the employees. Dr. Eiant Albin is a researcher in the Federman Cybersecurity Research Center and the academic director of the Minerva Center of Human Rights in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She will share with us her insight about the employees' rights and the need to balance between these rights and cybersecurity. Eiant, go ahead.
Thank you, Tamar, and thanks for inviting me to partake in this panel. So the perspective that I'm going to bring into the insider threat, is that of employee and labor rights. When we're thinking about these issues of how to protect from cyber attacks by possible insider hackers or other people that can destabilize the activities of the cyberspace, then we're looking most of the time on employees. And here we have to bring into consideration how we address their employees' rights and labor rights within this setting. So indeed, cybersecurity is an important agenda of companies who are required to secure their cyberspace, to protect their databases, to enable the flow of their services, protect the environment, and prevent other possible social harms. One of the challenges related to possible hackers and attackers coming from within the companies, mainly employees, are a main threat of these companies. And therefore, monitoring the activities of employees has become an important aspect of protecting the cyberspace. But what happens when this monitoring of activities and the gathering of data and assessing this data might infringe employment rights and labor rights? What I'm going to present before you today is the traditional view of employees' rights and the main perspective through which employees' rights are assessed within employment law today and cybersecurity regulations as well. And I'll offer an alternative due to the problems that we have with this traditional way of looking at those who are responsible to secure employees' rights. So the traditional way to look at the possibility of the infringement of employees' rights in an era of cybersecurity is through the lens offered us by labor law that adopt several basic understandings in protecting these rights. First of all, labor law perceives the employment relationship as a binary relationship, as a relationship between two parties, the employer and the employee. Within this type of relationship, the employer has its prerogative to decide what happens within the workplace. He has its responsibilities, for example, in regards to cybersecurity. But we also have within this relationship the importance to secure employment rights. Under this traditional perspective, unions are viewed as the best possible entity to address the possible infringement of employment rights, to provide employees with further power than they have on a single relationship with their employer, and to address also issues of infringement of rights resulting from cybersecurity. Now, new technologies, including cybersecurity technologies and AI technologies, and we know that AI is very much used in relation to cyber technologies, they increase the employer's authoritative power and prerogative. Why is that? Because the employer has the knowledge and information on the technology. It decides whether to purchase the technology. It also partakes many times in designing the technology when it purchases a service or a particular technology to its workplace. And therefore, this technology increases its prerogative because it has the information. The information provides us with a lot of power, and decision-making, of course, provides us with a lot of power, so as decisions on how to monitor and the employee's activities. This creates an imbalance of power within the employment relationship that already exists in every employment relationship, but is increased due to the use of new technologies and the responsibilities that employers have to protect their cyberspace. This imbalance of power has led to address employment rights in a particular way. So let's take an example, the right to privacy. Employers have a responsibility due to the binary. They are the sole entity responsible to protect the right of privacy, or in Europe, the right to private life of their employees. Unions are seen through this prism as important in managing the algorithm or partaking in the process of purchasing and designing the technology so as to secure as much as possible employees' rights, and in this case, the right to privacy. Legal tools have been adopted. Also, in various national contexts, we have different legal tools to address this problem, but generally, they look for a legitimate purpose for the possible infringement of labor rights, in this case, the right to privacy, adopting a proportionality test to ensure that the technology that is adopted infringes employees' rights in the minimal way possible, that perhaps there are alternative technologies that will also lessen the infringement of possible rights in a minimal way. And the law also proposes other ways to address this power gap between the parties, such as providing information to employees on the technology. This is something that is said in the GDPR, or securing in a more forceful way employees' rights, seeing them as human rights, basic human rights that should be protected, particularly in regard, for example, to the right to privacy. So this is the traditional perspective, and we know that legal tools around the world regarding employment fall into this paradigm that sees the binary, sees employment relationship, the employer responsibility, see unions as a crucial actor within the protection of employment rights in an era of cybersecurity, and also considers the increased authoritative power of the employer when thinking about these legal rules and adopting all these various ways to mitigate between the employer prerogative and the rights of employees. But what I want to argue is that this perspective misses to see the actual power relationship that exists within the world of cybersecurity beyond the binary relationship. For example, we have the role of national cybersecurity authorities, and the level of their involvement within the private and public sector is an important source of power that can affect eventually employees' rights. When these authorities have more power because of cybersecurity laws in various national contexts, the possibility of their involvement within the way cybersecurity companies, or companies generally, monitor, gather data, assess the data, and impact upon employees' rights become more power to something that we should consider. I'm sorry. Another important actor within this regime is the companies that develop and design the technologies. And their power here is highly crucial. In a research I'm conducting these days, I'm gathering information on the way several cybersecurity companies sell their products. And these companies are very proud of the various activities through which they gather the information to prevent cybersecurity attack. And particularly they put focus on the possibility of the insider threat. So one company, for example, which I will not expose its name, but looks at various data sources to gather information. So emails, voice, chats, network, endpoint, identification, human resources data, third parties fees, physical access. All these sources of data are used to gather information on the employees. After that, they have the analytic engine that assesses this information and decides whether there's a threat. And then they have this informed narrative. Usually, many times, they look, for example, at work in various hours of the night as a threat to cybersecurity, to emails where employees say bad things about their employers as a possible threat, to situation where employees even create their own WhatsApp group without the employer as a possible threat to cybersecurity. Now, once looking at all these activities of employees as a cyber threat, we can see how much it's impossible for employees, even dedicated employees who work throughout a night, they're seen as a cyber threat. They want to join together for any cause, creating their own WhatsApp group, they're seen as a threat. They say something bad or negative about their employer, which is quite common among employees many times. Who are they going to trash about as opposed to their employer before their friends? They're seen as a threat. In these situations, their privacy is infringed, so as possible other labor rights. For example, the right to unionize. Workers need to create their own WhatsApp group without being monitored by the employer in order to unionize in this day and age. They need to work in flexible times, especially during the coronavirus, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very harsh way of gathering information, possible infringement of employees' rights. Now, the problem is that these companies, these cybersecurity companies, come with this agenda to employers, selling them their product, saying it's essential for securing the cyberspace. Employers, they have the prerogative to decide, of course, if they want to purchase the technology, if they want to redesign it in another way that is more proportionate in regards to the infringement of employment rights. But we can actually see how this actor is very important source of power that affects eventually these rights, and we need to consider them. So what we have actually is a much more complex network of actors that shape the power relation within employment that goes beyond the employer. Now, once there's an understanding of this network of further actors that affect power relations and affect the possibility of infringement of employees' rights, serious thought should be given to how to regulate this space beyond the employment relationship, and how these actors should be placed with some sort of ethical or legal responsibility in protecting the rights of their their clients or their third parties' employees. Within this network, once we understand that this network is including these very strong actors, national cybersecurity authorities, the companies developing the technology, the employer, and then we have this small employee in the middle, we understand the significance of power relations affecting the possible infringement of labor rights and the justifications that can be given to all these actors' activities, how important their work is, as opposed to the employees' rights. And the ability even of unions to address this complex regime is much more limited. Unions do not have power over these other actors that are outside the employment relationship, and they don't have the knowledge, are not in the process of designing the technologies and deciding when these companies and national cybersecurity authorities come to say, okay, guys, you have to take serious measures against insider threats. So I believe that there is a need for a new framework to develop, to place accountability and obligations on further third parties beyond the binary employment relationship, if we really want to secure employees' rights in our world today. Employers, of course, continue to have the main sole responsibility to protect their employees' rights, but our further challenge in order to achieve that goal is to look at this network and these actors and to think of their accountabilities and responsibilities towards employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Eiant. I wanted to ask two questions. So let's start with the life cycle of the employee. You mentioned, or you talked a lot about monitoring and supervising and collecting information on an employee who is already working in the company. What about the initial stage of recruiting those employees? What are we able or should do in order to recruit better, less threatening employees? Do the employer have anything to do there? Any obligations maybe, or authority to scrutinize the workers beforehand? So that's the first question. The other question I have for you is, what about international companies that are working in different branches around the world. Are there any differences with regard to the regulation in different countries? Should we monitor, one branch over the other, or profile employees from one department or one branch over the other? So I'd like to pick your brain on those two questions.
So thanks, Tamar. These are excellent questions. I'll start with the first one. So in regards to the hiring process, which I agree with you, I haven't addressed in my discussion. I think that as in every hiring, every company does, it has to make sure that the person she hires is the most suitable for the job. And therefore, it can use various tests to ensure that, including some test or examination regarding the employer's loyalty to the company, to previous situations where he might have been accused of some kinds of illegal activities, et cetera, et cetera. For this matter, employers already have the tools to do these tests. For example, in Israel, when people are hired for security companies, not necessarily cybersecurity, but national security companies, they go through a very lengthy scrutinizing process where their background is checked so as other possible infringements that they might have to the activities of the company. So I think that as long as it falls within these legitimate tests that are done, that's really part of the employer prerogative to assess these issues before decisions to hire. At the same time, employers are limited in their ability at that period of time to access information on their employees without their, of course, consent, without the possibility to receive this information. And therefore, the tests that are already in place or common can be, I think, adjusted to issues of cybersecurity and used, but the activities of employers, potential employers, are limited in the information that they can gather because of privacy issues of individuals. And so I think that within these limitations, security companies, cybersecurity companies or other companies can, of course, act. Regarding to your second question, when we have, for example, international companies that have branches in all kinds of places in the world, and we know that in each location there are different labor laws. The labor laws that apply are local labor laws. And I think it's very similar to issues that were raised before in labor, where you have international for example, networks regarding the provision of services, service chains, supply chains, production chains. We have various actors along the chain that might infringe workers' rights or employees' rights. And we already have a lot of models within international labor law and other regulations of labor law to address these instances. So even though we accept that different national contexts have their ability, to regulate the employees' rights of their employees, there are still codes of behavior and regulation that apply on the international level. And I think these should be designed also in relation to cybersecurity in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. It seems that there is agreement within this panel that we are facing a huge challenge in order to address the insider threat and protect the cyber, the customers, the company, the employees, as well as think about human rights within this context. So thank you all presenters, and I wish us all good luck.